has been the most enlivening conversation. We're just, again, just filled with joy right now and inspired. And so thank you so much for being here. I think one of the main things we really wanted to talk about was your own model of care. I know it's something you've been working on, and how you might operationalize it, and also why you think it's so important, especially right now.
So I'll say this in reflection, which is that when I built the center back in 2010, I really thought that I was creating a place. And although I did create a place, and for 10 years that place served a lot of people, what I really didn't fully understand was that it was the early stages of understanding a totally different way to do care. And it really is in the last couple of years since the center has closed, which was right during the early parts of COVID, that I have been able to myself incubate what we took at the center and make it into like the 2.0 or 3.0 version of that, which has consistently been with an ideology of being able to not only just scale it, but apply it in a much wider way. And as I said before, I'm interested in a model that is available to everybody. I don't think that it's useful to have a model that is only available to some. And I'm interested in a model that meets people where they're at and also meets the systems that they are embedded in where they're at. So we're not just looking at the treatment or the support of an individual in their maturation, but we're also looking at the support of the entire community that that person is within. Because we understand that much of the challenges with mental health and physical health, for all intents and purposes, are the ways that we are impeded upon by those larger systems. And so it's very hard to liberate one system within the context of many that are holding back from that or resisting that liberation. And what we really need is community, again, that can be generative, cooperative, and that people within that community can be in what I call their right places. So one of the things that happens in the architecture of systemic oppression is that it falsely takes people out of their right positionality. And because, as you guys probably already know, my interest is in the energetics and the architecture or the structure of the systems more than it is about the psychology of the systems, which is produced from the structure and the energetics. It's downstream from that. I really have been intensely interested in the way that things are constellated or created into certain arrangements and how we might change those arrangements to promote the generativity that is already present. So we don't have to then work so hard to create generativity. We're harvesting what already is present. And in my model, I call that not leaving money on the table, which is basically that there's a currency of generativity or love or connection present, but that it gets ignored or it gets usurped by systems of oppression or structures of oppression. And so I'm looking at how we can do this within communities. And of course, because I'm an Aquarius, I'm most interested in doing this in communities where there is a ton of diversity. So where there is already economic diversity, where there is already racial diversity, where there is already cultural diversity, because then there's a way to test this model and incubate it where the strands go out much wider. You can have the deepest effect. So funny enough, and I'll just put a plug in for this, one of the places that was my first target was the area of Queens that AOC's districted in, because she actually has some of the most diverse part of the United States. And the diversification is actually not so skewed into like have and have nots. There's a lot of in between too. And so I would be looking to put this in a place where we could research it for at least a year to begin with. We'd be looking at many different factors that I have identified, both presupposing factors and then also measuring the outcomes that are typical, like is there a reduction in symptoms? Is there an increase in unification? Is there an increase in like positive affect? Is there an increase in breathing? So also looking at that, how are people breathing? How are their nervous systems? So I'd be looking at kind of this wide expanse of measurements. What are their dreams like? What is their gut health like? How is hormonal health? If you look at this in an entire community that you're incubating, then you have a chance of really looking at wider public health kind of application. And so I'd like to do this in a couple of different locations so that the starting conditions are different and we can really find out where we need to refine things. And then we could look at a wider public health application to that. Because everybody needs to be able, and everybody is entitled to this kind of thing. I mean, this is what you're born into. It's not for some people, it's for everybody. And of course, what we know is that if affect increases, if productivity increases, if positive relationality increases, people become better contributors to society. They vote differently. Their ability to drive is less aggravated by anger. You know, I mean, everything improves. And so I think we need to look at it from the bottom up rather than the top down, which is what we're currently looking at.
That's just, yeah, so incredibly transformative and necessary. How do we make that happen? Like, are you fundraising right now? Is there, yeah, what's the process? How can we help?
So, I mean, I have a white paper. I have a pretty good business plan that's in place. I have not been fundraising, mostly because I have this unconventional view of fundraising, which is that I kind of believe that if you build the thing, the money will come. And I know that the money is there. So I've been really focused on refining and building the thing so that it would be ready to go. And I feel pretty strongly that I've been looking at the right energetic tipping point in the collective. And I feel that we are almost there, if not already there, where there's this intersectionality of disappointment and challenges and loss in the current system, and this ripening or desire for something different that it is happening in people at many different levels. So it used to be that only certain people were identifying that. Now it is more diffused among many different kind of states of consciousness that are aware of this. And I think that I've been waiting for that moment where it feels like there's a readiness for this to happen. And on my side, it feels very ready because I've been spending a lot of time developing it so that it would be ready to go when the time was right.
I love what you say too, just about just having it ready because the funding will come. I was talking to Dr. Anna Yusim, another EPRC member. I know you've heard some of the podcasts with her, and yeah, she was talking too about fundraising for her center and how it is really difficult to be able to do that, but also how you almost have to like re-envision what fundraising is and seeing it as a simultaneous giving back, but it's so hard to do that at the same time. And but yeah, I do love what you're saying, and it's just like it's the energy having to be right. And how do you think society, like, what do you think? So do you think COVID played a big role in like the fact of the adversity being necessary for as like an impetus to change?
I do. I think it's partially the adversity. I think it's also the fact that people became isolated in COVID and they moved away from many of the structures that they were kind of caught in before. So people were home with their kids, they were home with partners, they were home with family, or they were home alone. And so I think that really incubated a way that people were like, I'm not going back to that thing. I always joke that like, in the post-COVID world, we have no pharmacists, but we have 100 body workers. And so this is kind of what has happened, is that people are recognizing that the way they were living before wasn't really sustainable, and that they don't want to go back to that kind of like starvation as they had before. And I think as far as funding goes, dovetailing off of what you said, Bryn, you know, money is just one energetic currency that comes in support of something that is ready to be in a particular place. And so my job has been really to listen to this thing that is not really mine, but has come through me, and to be responsive to it in how it wants to be alive in the world. And its application, like, it has spoken to me and said, like, it doesn't want to be in 20 like little clinics all over the country where only certain people can reach it. It wants to be more diversified. It wants to be more distributed, because that represents the nature of the thing at its foundation. Even my funding plan in my white paper is a funding that is multi-level and comes from many different sources rather than one funding agency. And that's because it demands buy-in from many, many different actors within this. When you have buy-in, you care about outcome. You are putting your currency where you care about love's outcome. And that feels deeply important to me. Otherwise, I'm misrepresenting the thing that I'm speaking about. If it doesn't have that integrity from the base, then anything that I build will not last. And I want this thing to last way beyond me. Like, I want to do this, and then I want to go sell beauty products and like vacation in the Maldives. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm 51. I don't have that much time left. So like, I don't want to be doing this forever, like in charge of it. I want it to carry itself. And it's just my job to set its foundation properly for that.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that's the amazing way to go about it. Mariam, did you have anything you want to say?
I'm speechless again. I'm speechless again. Bree, what aside from money do you need to set this foundation?
I mean, I think the thing that money buys is the ability to hire a team that could help to really put this into play. There will be researchers that will be necessary. There will be the development of research protocols. There will be admin pieces of it. There will be some marketing pieces. And honestly, everybody thinks the marketing needs to be the biggest, but it really doesn't. I mean, when I created the center in Vermont, the marketing was our smallest budget. There have to be negotiations with like statewide systems of payer systems. That's a huge other piece we haven't spoken about that I've looked to remediate with this model, is how do we pull in payer systems? How do we seamlessly create engagement between care outcomes and payer systems that supports an interdisciplinary integrative model? We don't have that right now. So right now, payer systems pay for certain slices of treatment in an integrative model. I want payer systems to be able to back and support a fully integrated model, which means body work is a part of it, meditation is a part of it, yoga is a part of it. And not just because those things have been studied in silos, but because they understand that those applications can be used strategically, as I said earlier in this podcast, to be able to support well-being and wholeness, and that they are being used strategically, not just applied randomly as some great thing that we know that works. We need to get more strategic about our delivery of care. There's an efficacy help to that, but there's also a sustainability help about that. I'm interested in making things as cheap as possible, as like sharp as possible, so that we get the best results in the shortest time. Right now we have so much time and still we're not getting that great of a result. So I want to play with those variables so that we are efficient and also wide and deep. As far as I know, no model's been able to do that yet. Wide and deep is still not efficient. I want to refine the heck out of that. Then we build a model that is actually scalable, has integrity and efficacy, and is affordable, because this is what we need. We don't need to spend more resources. We don't need to throw more money at it. We're so big at throwing so much money at things, and still the outcomes are mediocre.
Yeah, I did want to highlight, just for listeners who don't know that much about the clinic that you ran, the waiting list was how long?
Oh my God. So we opened with about 5 practitioners in an 8,000 square foot space. No, we weren't that big. No, we were 5,000 square foot space with a little yoga center in the center, and then all the offices around the outside. And I would say by about month, maybe 6 or 8, we started to go on and off a waiting list. But for the last 4 years, we never went off of a waiting list. And it's been 3 years, and last week I got 8 new referrals. I mean, this happens every week. And Vermont's tiny. Like this, keep in mind that this is a small state with very low population, not what you would think of as a super sophisticated audience. We don't have high reimbursing payer systems. Everybody uses insurance. So in some ways, this was a challenging place to incubate this kind of model. And it still taught me that there's a way to make it work both fiscally and practically in order to implement. Yeah.
And since then, your model has become even more refined, but even at that earlier stage, the efficacy of what you were doing spoke for itself.
Yes, the efficacy of it, what we were doing, absolutely still speaks for itself, because we're still getting referrals. And I could tell you that if I walked back in now to there, knowing what I know, I would tear the thing up, because we were not efficient enough. I was still shooting arrows at places that I didn't fully understand. And I know with any beta tests we would run of this new thing in 3 different settings, I would also learn more. You're always refining and growing. But I would say that at that point, the scalability didn't have the deep precision that I think it would and could have now. And that's really important.
I think that's really indicative of the future success of this too, is your ability to just refurbish and rework things. And if something isn't working, you're not scared to question yourself and be like, oh wait, maybe this isn't working. And because that is, again, it also goes back to our obsession with self and identity. And it's I'm like this and I'm the same, things can't change, versus being like, no, if something's going to get better, we have to reform and change and grow anew. And
yeah, no, this is a piece of art. Everything is a piece of art. This is a piece of art. And so this is like any piece of art, which is that a piece of clay, you keep sculpting it, right? And you keep refining it, and then you destroy the thing, and then you create something else, but it's the same piece of clay. And so that's the continuance of this in the same way. And so people who were in Vermont and who came to the center as clients or practitioners, they will recognize the resonance, because the energetic of this is still the one, it's the thread from there, but the application of it will look refined and a bit different from what we did there.
Okay, so Bree, are you also finding as a member of the EPRC, has that been useful for you, engaging with other researchers doing similar work? And what would you say has been, the best part of being a member of the EPRC?
So I love the EPRC, and I have used the network in the EPRC less than I should. I spend more time browsing the network of the EPRC than actually engaging with it. And some of that has been just due to the nature of my own life up until this point and what I'm holding and what I'm deciding to do with. But I really think there's a huge power in having these networks, and we have nothing like this already. I mean, what Daniel has created with the EPRC has not existed. And so when I first met Daniel, I actually, like everybody else, reached out to him because I was having crazy emergent experiences, and I thought because he was a kind of edgy Buddhist practitioner. He was going to be able to know what was going on with me. And I had already tried like 10,000 other people. And so in our first conversation, I was describing things to him, and he had not created the EPRC yet. He was in the early stages of getting ready to do it. And he was talking to me about it. And as he was talking to me, I could feel my heart rate like exploding in my throat, because I was like, oh my God, I have a project that dances so well with this. And I started like spouting it all out at him because I was so excited that like we were thinking very similar things, but from me from the clinical aspect and him from this kind of like research and support aspect. And I loved talking with him, and I loved the information that he held and the brilliance of his own work. And so that was how actually I wound up being one of the first board members. And it's one of the things that I feel is deeply in my heart. I love this project. I love the board. I love what he's after, and I think the world needs it. And I think like most things that are like Daniel's project, he's so far ahead of his time that people have not yet recognized the importance and the breadth of what he is trying to do. And as a person who is a fellow Aquarian, who is often ahead of their time, I understand what it is to do that. You have to do a lot of kind of selling and a lot of explaining in order for people to understand why it's relevant. And so to me, the EPRC is deeply relevant now, but will be even more relevant in the years to come as the world begins to shift. And that is when I think the real payload will be there for all of us who have been there from the beginning. And by payload, I just mean like the gratitude for having been at this thing from the beginning.
Absolutely. Yeah, that just, as usual, eloquently articulated and so true. Yeah, I just feel really grateful to be part of such an amazing network of researchers. And then your energy, too, that just when you're talking about it, too. You keep talking about this in the interview, but I'm just like, so anyway, just incredible to hear that. Mariam, before we sign off, do you have any questions for Bree?
Yeah, maybe our last and most important question. Bree, what do you think is the part of your work that you love the most?
I mean, I definitely love teaching. So I think when I can boil down like my own identity categories to anything, that's probably one of the few that seems to have lasted for me. Everything else has mostly come and gone, other than I'm still a mother and I'll always be a mother, but also a teacher. And the width of that application, I think, allows me a lot of play. I think I feel really joyful about being able to engage with people and see them come into their own movement patterns and their own voice and their own expression that feels so much more fulfilling and generative and alive to them. And I think that how can you ever do anything better than that, than witness that? And I think on a more kind of tangible level, the thing that I feel really excited about doing is I actually feel really excited about researching this model in some specific ways. Like I'm interested in creating certain cohorts that look like they don't go together and seeing where the unification is, kinds of research that have not existed yet, like putting chronic pain up against emergers, up against eating disorders. And like, how do those three seemingly different conditions actually boil down to the same root? And can we use the same landscape to refine what's happening there without splitting up those categories and our research protocols? So I'm interested in doing very unconventional things there. And I think at heart, I'm both a teacher and a scientist. And so those are places that I have not been able to indulge as much within me that I'd like to do more of.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your wealth of knowledge and your wisdom and just the beauty of your words. Again, I've written down everything you, even though this is recorded, I'm like, I still have to also write down every word she says. But yeah, it's just been such a pleasure to have you. Thank you. I've learned so much. You're amazing.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you. It was really fun. Thank you, Mariam. Thank
It
you,
was
Bryn.
really fun. And as always, you're so illuminating, and I hope everyone that comes across this feels the same way. I mean, how could they not?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
Ya,